Captain Alara Voss stood on the bridge of the Odyssey, staring into the endless darkness of space. The stars glittered like scattered jewels against the black canvas, each one a reminder of how small they were in the grand scheme of the universe. But Alara's gaze wasn't on the stars. It was on the empty space ahead, a space where no one believed anything remained, except her. And that was why she was here, leading this mission, long after every other species had stopped believing in the myth. They called her foolish, reckless even. But to Alara, it wasn't recklessness. It was hope. The lost planet, known in half-forgotten legends as Solace, was a world shrouded in mystery. For centuries, alien scholars whispered its name, their curiosity fading as countless searches turned up nothing. But humans, they weren't like the others. The impossibility of the task was part of what made it worth chasing. As long as even the faintest chance remained, Alara believed Solace was out there, waiting to be found. She just had to keep looking. Her crew, a ragtag group of explorers, scientists, and dreamers, shared her conviction, or at least enough of it to sign up for the journey. Some of them had personal reasons for joining. Others simply wanted to be part of something bigger than themselves. But in the quiet moments, when the ship hummed softly and the stars outside seemed endless, Alara wondered how many of them were holding on to hope as tightly as she was. It was easy to believe at the start of a journey. The real challenge was holding on to that belief when things began to fall apart. Alara turned from the viewport and walked across the bridge, her boots making a soft clink against the metal floor. "How are we looking, Joss?" she asked, addressing her pilot, a wiry man with sharp eyes and a grin that never quite reached his face. Joss glanced at his console. "We're coming up on the nebula. Sensors are fuzzy, but it looks like smooth sailing for now." "Good. Let's hope it stays that way." Behind them, the ship's engineer, Marta, muttered something under her breath as she adjusted a stubborn console. "If the drive holds, it'll be a miracle." She shot Alara a meaningful look. "And we've already used up our miracle quota." Alara smiled. "Then it's a good thing we don't believe in quotas." Marta snorted, but there was affection in her eyes. They all knew the risks. They were flying into uncharted space, relying on patchy information, and a belief that no one else in the galaxy shared. But they had each other, and somehow that was enough. The journey wasn't without its challenges. The Odyssey was old, a repurposed exploration vessel with more quirks than features. They had patched her up the best they could before leaving the space dock, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time before something important gave out. Every clunk and groan from the ship's hull was a reminder of how precarious their situation was. They had been traveling for months, passing through star systems that were little more than cosmic graveyards. Other ships, other crews had searched these regions long ago, leaving behind nothing but fragments of data and debris. The aliens had tried and failed, their hope fading with each generation. But humanity's hope was different. It wasn't about probability or logic. It was about stubbornness, the kind that told you to keep going, even when everyone else had given up. The bridge lights dimmed slightly as the Odyssey passed through the outer edge of the nebula, a swirling cloud of gas and dust that glittered faintly in the ship's floodlights. Alara leaned forward, her pulse quickening. This nebula was rumored to be the final resting place of ships that had searched for solace centuries ago. If they were lucky, they might find something, anything, that could lead them closer to the mythical planet. Joss adjusted the ship's course, his fingers flying over the controls. "We're deep enough in the nebula to scan for any old signals," he said. "Might pick up something the others missed," Marta muttered, "or something that'll rip us apart." Alara ignored the comment and focused on the flickering data on the screen in front of her. The sensors struggled to cut through the interference, but she knew they were getting close. She could feel it, a pull in her chest, like the universe was guiding them towards something important. Then a blip, faint, barely perceptible, but unmistakable. Alara's heart skipped a beat. "What is that?" Joss leaned in, his eyes narrowing. "Some kind of signal. Old, really old." Marta frowned. "How old?" Joss tapped a few keys, and the ship's computer struggled to decode the signal. Finally, a garbled message appeared on the screen, accompanied by a faint series of coordinates. "It's from an alien ship," Joss said slowly. "Looks like a distress beacon." Alara's mind raced. A distress beacon meant they weren't the first to search this region, but the fact that the signal was still active suggested that whoever had sent it had never made it back. "Can you pinpoint the location?" "Already on it," Joss replied. "It's coming from deep inside the nebula. pretty far off course. Marta shook her head. If we go in there, we might not come back out. Ilara knew she was right. The nebula was treacherous, filled with gravitational anomalies and hidden dangers, but she also knew they couldn't ignore the signal. It was the first real lead they had found in months, a thread of hope in a galaxy that seemed determined to bury solace in myth. We don't have a choice, Ilara said quietly. If someone else made it this far, maybe they left behind something we can use. Jos gave her a lopsided grin. You mean other than their bones? Ilara shot him a look, but there was no malice in it. They all coped with the uncertainty in their own way. For Jos, it was sarcasm. For Marta, it was grim practicality. And for Ilara, it was the unwavering belief that they were meant to find solace. The ship shuddered slightly as they adjusted course, heading deeper into the nebula. The lights flickered again, and for a moment, Ilara thought she heard something, like a whisper carried on the static of the ship's systems, but it was gone before she could be sure it had been real. They moved in silence, the only sound the steady hum of the ship's engines. As they approached the source of the signal, a shape began to emerge from the swirling mist, an alien ship, massive and lifeless, its hull scarred by time and space. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for, the signal, the coordinates, the possibility that solace was more than just a dream. They were close, so close, and nothing in the galaxy could stop them now. Prepare to dock, Ilara ordered, her voice steady despite the excitement thrumming in her veins. This was only the beginning, but for the first time in months, she knew, truly knew, that they were on the right path. The Odyssey drifted deeper into the nebula, swallowed by the swirling clouds of cosmic dust. The engines hummed, vibrating through the hull, as the crew pushed forward into the unknown. The signal from the alien distress beacon was growing stronger, each new reading a reminder that they were not the first to venture here, and they might not be the last to vanish. But the thought of turning back never crossed Captain Ilara Voss's mind. They were too close now, closer than anyone had ever been. The light on the bridge dimmed again, the ship's systems struggling to cope with the electromagnetic interference. Ilara gripped the armrest of her seat as a deep shudder ran through the hull. Steady, Jos, she murmured. Jos swore under his breath as he wrestled with the controls. I've got it. Just hang on. His hands danced over the console, making minute adjustments to the thrusters. Outside the viewport, the swirling nebula shifted and parted, revealing pockets of jagged rocks drifting lazily through space. Marta's voice crackled over the comms. We've got some turbulence down here, Cap. That interference is messing with our power grid. If we push too hard, something might fry. Ilara tapped the comm switch on her chair. Just keep us going, Marta. We're almost there. The line went silent for a moment before Marta replied with a resigned sigh. Copy that. But if this crate blows up, I'm haunting you in the afterlife. Ilara grinned. Noted. Jos chuckled beside her. At least we'll have company, right? The levity didn't last. As they pushed deeper into the nebula, the interference intensified, and strange phenomena began to appear on the sensors. Gravitational anomalies that twisted light and space, radiation spikes that came and went like phantom storms. The further they ventured, the more dangerous the journey became. The Odyssey shuddered violently as it skimmed the edge of a gravity well, the ship groaning in protest. Ilara felt the deck tilt beneath her feet as the artificial gravity fluctuated. She held on, her heart pounding in her chest. Keep her steady, she urged Jos. I'm trying, he muttered through clenched teeth. The controls jerked in his hands, but he kept the ship on course with sheer force of will. Marta's voice came over the comms again, tight with tension. If this keeps up, we're gonna start losing systems, Captain. We've already got coolant leaks in the lower decks. Ilara's mind raced. They couldn't turn back now, not with the distress beacon so close, but every second in the nebula was wearing down the ship, fraying the already thin thread they were clinging to. She made a decision. Divert all non-essential power to the engines. We need to get to that signal fast. Marta didn't argue. The engineer knew, just as Ilara did, that hesitation could mean death out here. Jos grinned despite the tension. All in, huh? I like your style, Captain. Let's hope it pays off, Ilara said under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. The ship lurched again as it powered through the interference, the hum of the engines rising to a strained whine. Outside, the swirling mist grew denser, and flashes of light danced along the edges of the viewport, electrical storms sparking within the nebula's heart. The signal from the distress beacon grew louder, more distinct. They were close now. So close Ilara could almost feel the answers waiting for them. But just as hope began to rise in her chest, the ship's alarms blared. Jos cursed, his hands flying over the console. "We've got a gravity well forming right in front of us. We'll be caught in it if we don't move. Now." Ilara didn't hesitate. "Punch it." Full burn. The Odyssey roared as the engines surged to maximum power. The ship shuddered, groaning under the strain, but it shot forward like a bullet through the nebula. The gravity well tugged at them, pulling at the hull like a giant invisible hand. But Joss fought the controls with everything he had. "Come on, come on," he muttered through gritted teeth, his knuckles white on the controls. The ship strained against the pull, the engines screaming as they fought to break free. Ilara held her breath, every muscle tensed, willing the ship forward. And then, with a sudden jolt, the Odyssey broke free of the gravity well, slingshotting out into a pocket of calm space. The alarms fell silent, and the ship steadied beneath them. Joss let out a breathless laugh. "We made it. I can't believe we actually made it." Ilara allowed herself a small smile. "We're not dead yet, that's a good sign." Marta's voice crackled over the comms again. "Everything's still in one piece. Barely, but you owe me a drink for this, Captain. A good one." Ilara chuckled. "I'll buy you the whole bar when we get back." Joss glanced at the console, his expression shifting to one of relief. "We're in the clear, and the signal is right ahead. It's weak, but it's definitely from a ship." Ilara leaned forward in her seat, her pulse quickening. "Put it on screen." The main display flickered to life, showing the silhouette of a massive alien vessel drifting silently in the void. Its hull was scarred and pitted, evidence of its long journey and violent end. But even in its ruined state, the ship had a haunting beauty, as if it had been built by a civilization that valued both function and art. Joss whistled softly. "That's one big ship. Looks ancient." Ilara's heart raced. "Prepare to dock. We need to find out what happened here." Marta's voice crackled over the comms. "Be careful in there, Captain. Ships like that don't end up abandoned without a good reason." "I know," Ilara replied, her gaze fixed on the alien vessel. "But we didn't come this far to walk away now." The Odyssey maneuvered carefully alongside the alien ship, its docking clamps latching onto the hull with a metallic thunk. Ilara stood, her heart pounding with anticipation. "Joss, you've got the bridge," she said, strapping on her gear. Joss gave her a lazy salute. "Try not to get eaten by space monsters, okay?" Ilara grinned. "No promises." She made her way to the airlock, where Marta was already waiting with a scanner in hand. "Ready?" Ilara asked. Marta gave a curt nod. "Let's see what secrets this ghost ship is hiding." The airlock hissed open, and Ilara stepped through, the sound of her boots echoing in the silence. Inside the alien ship, the air was stale and thin but breathable. Strange symbols lined the walls, their meaning lost to time. As they moved deeper into the ship, the sense of unease grew. It was too quiet, too still. It felt like the ship was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Then, they found the beacon. It was old and damaged, but still faintly glowing. Marta knelt beside it, her scanner whirring softly. "It's been broadcasting for centuries," she said quietly. "Whoever sent this signal, they never made it out." Ilara's gaze lingered on the beacon, her mind racing with possibilities. What had happened to the crew of this ship, and what had they been searching for? Then Marta's scanner beeped, and a fragment of data appeared on the screen. Coordinates. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. "Marta, these are new coordinates." Marta frowned. "New, but this beacon's been here for centuries." Ilara's pulse quickened, which means someone, something, left them here recently. "We're not alone out here." For a moment they stood in stunned silence, the weight of the discovery settling over them. Then Ilara straightened, determination burning in her eyes. "Get those coordinates back to the ship. We're moving forward." Marta gave her a skeptical look. "Even though we don't know what's waiting for us?" Ilara smiled. "Especially because we don't know." They returned to the Odyssey, the alien coordinates burning bright on their screens. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, they had a clear path forward, and Ilara knew with every fiber of her being that they were closer than ever to finding solace. No matter what lay ahead, they would not stop. They were human, after all, and humans didn't quit. The Odyssey drifted through the emptiness, the swirling mist of the nebula thinning as they left the ghost ship behind. Silence filled the bridge, thick and oppressive, broken only by the occasional hum of machinery. The alien coordinates now shone on their navigation screen, a beacon of hope. But out here in the far reaches of space, hope was a fragile thing. Days stretched into weeks as the crew followed the coordinates toward a distant, uncharted sector. The excitement that had flared when they found the ghost ship began to dim, replaced by the creeping unease that came with endless waiting. The stars outside blurred into indistinguishable pinpricks of light, and the weight of isolation began to settle over the crew like a suffocating blanket. Captain Ilara Voss stood at the viewport, arms crossed, her mind restless. She knew this part of the journey would test them more than any battle or disaster could. When there was nothing but time and silence, doubt crept in like a cold wind. The hardest part of any mission was keeping hope alive when the end was nowhere in sight. Behind her, Joss stretched in his seat, cracking his knuckles. "You ever wonder if we're just chasing shadows out here?" he asked, not looking up from his console. Ilara turned to face him, raising an eyebrow. "You having second thoughts?" "Not really." Joss shrugged, offering her a half-smile. "Just, wondering how long we can keep this up before someone snaps." Marta's voice drifted from the back of the bridge, dry as ever. "Speak for yourself, flyboy. I've already snapped twice." Joss chuckled, but the humor didn't quite reach his eyes. The tension among the crew was palpable, an unspoken weight that pressed down on them all. They had come too far to turn back, but the endless void ahead offered little comfort. Ilara leaned against the console, studying her crew. Joss masked his anxiety with sarcasm. Marta dealt with stress by throwing herself into her work, tinkering with the ship's systems long after they needed repairs. They were all coping in their own ways, but Ilara knew that even the strongest resolve could erode over time. She let out a breath and forced a smile. "We knew this wasn't going to be easy, but we've already made it farther than anyone else. That has to count for something." Marta snorted. "If we die out here, I doubt anyone will care how far we got." Ilara shot her a look. "We're not going to die." Joss grinned. "Captain's orders, huh?" "That's right," Ilara said firmly. "No dying allowed." The humor was thin, but it was enough to break the tension, if only for a moment. Ilara knew that moments like these were essential, small sparks to keep the darkness at bay. They couldn't afford to let despair take root. As the days wore on, the journey took its toll. Supplies dwindled, systems malfunctioned, and tempers flared. Arguments broke out over trivial matters: whose turn it was to monitor the sensors, who had left tools lying around, who was hoarding the last of the coffee. Ilara did her best to keep the peace, but even she felt the strain. She spent long hours alone in her quarters, staring at the star charts, willing the alien coordinates to lead them somewhere, anywhere. One night, as the ship drifted through the silent void, Ilara found herself standing in front of the crew's makeshift memorial wall. Photos, drawings, and trinkets were taped to the wall, a collection of memories from those who had come before them: friends, family, comrades lost to time and space. Ilara's gaze lingered on a worn photograph tucked into the corner, a picture of her father, standing beside an old starship. He had been one of the first explorers to chase the myth of Solace, a dreamer who believed in the impossible. He never found the lost planet, and he never came back. Ilara clenched her fists, a knot of emotion tightening in her chest. She had spent her entire life following in her father's footsteps, determined to finish what he had started. But now, in the quiet darkness of the ship, she couldn't help but wonder if she was making the same mistake. What if Solace was just a story? What if they were chasing nothing more than a dream? She closed her eyes, leaning her forehead against the cold metal wall. "What am I doing, Dad?" she whispered into the silence. "Why do I keep going?" There was no answer, just the hum of the ship and the distant flicker of the stars outside. The next morning, the crew gathered in the common area for a meeting. Ilara knew she had to address the growing tension before it tore them apart. She stood at the head of the table, meeting each of their gazes in turn. "I know this mission has been harder than we expected," she began, her voice steady. "And I know some of you are wondering if we're wasting our time out here, but we made a choice to believe in something bigger than ourselves. We chose to hope, even when everyone else gave up." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Hope isn't easy. It's not supposed to be, but it's what makes us human. It's what keeps us moving forward, even when the road gets dark." Joss leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "And what if the road doesn't lead anywhere?" Ilara met his gaze, unwavering. "Then we'll find a new road, because that's what we do. We don't quit. We don't stop believing." Marta gave a small, reluctant nod. "Guess there's worse things to die for." Ilara smiled. "We're not dying, remember?" Joss chuckled. "Captain's orders." The mood in the room lightened, if only a little. They still had a long way to go, but for now, the spark of hope flickered once more. Later that day, the ship's sensors picked up a faint signal, an anomaly just beyond the edge of their current course. It was weak and distorted, but it was there. A new lead, a new hope. Ilara felt her heart lift as she studied the readings. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to remind her why they were out here. Enough to keep going. "Plot a course," she ordered, her voice filled with quiet determination. "We're not done yet." As the Odyssey shifted course, the crew settled back into their stations, the hum of the engines a familiar comfort. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in days, Ilara felt a sense of peace. They were not lost. They were not alone, and no matter what lay ahead, they would keep moving forward, because that's what it meant to be human. And somewhere, out there in the vast expanse of the galaxy, Solace was waiting. They just had to hold on a little longer. The Odyssey glided through the final stretch of space, its crew running on fumes but unwilling to stop. The coordinates from the alien distress beacon had led them here, through turbulent nebulae, radiation fields, and gravitational traps. And now, in the calm void at the end of their journey, something extraordinary lay before them, a planet that defied explanation. Solace. The view from the bridge was unlike anything they had imagined. The planet glowed softly against the darkness of space, its atmosphere shimmering with hues of blue, green, and gold. From orbit, they could see lush continents draped in thick forests, gleaming oceans stretching into infinity, and delicate clouds drifting lazily over vibrant landscapes. It looked untouched by time, as if it had been waiting, patiently, quietly, for someone to find it. Ilara Voss sat in stunned silence, her hands trembling on the armrests of her chair. For years, she had dreamed of this moment. Now that it was real, it felt like something out of a fairy tale. "We did it," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "We found it." Joss let out a slow whistle. "Well, I'll be damned, it actually exists." Marta leaned against the console, shaking her head in disbelief. "I thought it was just a myth, a bedtime story for starry-eyed dreamers." Ilara smiled, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and relief. "Sometimes dreams are real." They stared at the planet in reverent silence for a few moments longer. Then Ilara gave the order that would change everything. "Take us down." The ship shuddered as it began its descent through the atmosphere. The view from the viewport shifted as they passed through layers of shimmering clouds, revealing the landscape below. Vast forests stretched across the horizon, their emerald canopies broken only by rivers that glittered like silver threads. Mountains towered in the distance, their peaks dusted with snow, while strange creatures moved gracefully through the valleys. The ship touched down in a wide meadow near the edge of a forest, its landing struts sinking slightly into the soft grass. Ilara felt a surge of emotion as the engines powered down, leaving only the sounds of the alien wilderness around them. They had done it. They were the first. "Suit up," Ilara ordered, rising from her seat. "We've got a whole new world to explore." Marta gave a low whistle. "You think there are things out there that want to eat us?" Joss grinned. "Wouldn't be an adventure without a little danger, right?" Ilara chuckled. "Let's hope we're more interesting as visitors than as snacks." The airlock hissed open, and the crew stepped out onto the surface of Solace, their boots sinking into the soft grass. The scent of unfamiliar flowers filled the air, sweet and heady, and the gentle hum of alien wildlife echoed around them. Ilara took a deep breath, savoring the moment. This was more than just a discovery. It was a triumph. Against all odds, they had found what everyone else believed to be a myth, and now, the entire galaxy would know that the impossible was possible. As they moved deeper into the meadow, they found ancient ruins half buried beneath the foliage. Stone pillars, weathered by time, stood like sentinels among the trees. Intricate carvings adorned the surfaces, symbols and images from a long-forgotten civilization. Marta knelt beside one of the pillars, running her fingers over the carvings. "This place is old, really old." Joes glanced around, his hand resting on his sidearm. "You think anyone or anything else is still here?" Ilara shook her head. "I don't know, but we didn't come all this way just to wonder. Let's find out." They pressed on, following a path that led through the ruins and into the heart of the forest. As they walked, they noticed strange plants glowing softly in the undergrowth and trees that seemed to hum with energy. It was as if the very land was alive, pulsing with a quiet, ancient power. They reached a large clearing where a stone altar stood, surrounded by more carved pillars. At the center of the altar lay a glowing orb, its surface swirling with colors that seemed to shift and dance. Ilara approached cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. Marta's scanner beeped as she pointed it at the orb. "It's giving off energy. Lots of it, but I've never seen readings like this before." Ilara reached out, her hand hovering over the orb. "It feels familiar, like it's been waiting for us." Joss shifted uneasily. "Careful, Captain. Things that glow in strange places usually come with a catch." Ilara ignored him and gently touched the orb. The moment her fingers made contact, the orb pulsed with light, and a wave of energy surged through the clearing. The carvings on the pillars began to glow, and the air hummed with a deep, resonant tone. Then, a voice echoed in their minds. Not words, but emotions. Hope, curiosity, welcome. The crew staggered, overwhelmed by the intensity of the message. Ilara gritted her teeth, fighting to stay on her feet. What is this? Marta stared at the orb in awe. I think it's alive. The orb pulsed again, and images flooded their minds, visions of civilizations long gone, their stories etched into the fabric of the planet. They saw wars and peace, rise and fall, creation and destruction. And through it all, one message remained constant: observe, prepare, hope. Ilara's heart raced as the meaning of the visions became clear. This planet wasn't just a paradise, it was a vault, a repository of knowledge and power. It had been waiting for someone, for something, for them. Joss exhaled sharply, shaking his head. This is too big. We have to tell the council. Ilara nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. The discovery of solace would change everything. The knowledge stored here could heal dying worlds, end conflicts, and reshape the future of the galaxy. But as the visions faded, a new message echoed in Ilara's mind, one that chilled her to the bone. Phase 2. Begin. She staggered, clutching her head. The words carried an ominous weight, as if the planet was not just a gift, but a warning. Marta's eyes widened. Did you hear that too? Ilara nodded slowly. Phase 2. What does it mean? Before they could ponder further, the ground beneath the altar shifted, revealing a hidden chamber. Inside lay artifacts and machines of alien design, their purpose unknown. But one thing was clear: Solace was more than a paradise. It was a puzzle, and they had just taken the first step toward unraveling it. Ilara stood at the edge of the chamber, her heart pounding with excitement and fear. They had found the lost planet, but now new questions loomed. What was Phase 2? And what had the ancient builders of Solace been preparing for? She turned to her crew, her expression resolute. We're not leaving until we find out everything. Solace is more than just a legend. It's a key, and we're going to unlock it. Joss gave her a wry smile. I had a feeling you'd say that. Marta sighed. Guess we're in this for the long haul, huh? Ilara nodded, a fierce determination burning in her chest. We didn't come this far to stop now. As the crew prepared to explore the hidden chamber, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing at the edge of something monumental. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Solace had chosen them, and whatever came next, they would face it together, because they were human, and humans never stopped searching. Not for answers, not for hope, and not for the future. The crew of the Odyssey stood at the entrance to the hidden chamber beneath the altar, their flashlights sweeping across the strange, ancient machines inside. Dust floated in the still air, untouched for millennia, as if this place had been waiting all along for someone to find it. The symbols on the walls glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the orb's energy. Whatever secrets lay within these ruins, they were now within reach. But at what cost? Captain Ilara Voss led the way, her heart pounding in her chest as she descended the narrow steps into the chamber. The deeper they went, the stronger the sense of anticipation grew, as if the very air was charged with expectation. Her team followed close behind, Marta with her scanner at the ready, and Jos with his hand resting nervously on his sidearm. When they reached the bottom, Ilara saw that the machines arranged before them were not simple relics of a lost civilization. They were more advanced than anything she had ever seen, far beyond even the most powerful technology of the galactic empires. Strange geometric shapes hovered in midair, humming with energy. Tubes of light spiraled upward toward the ceiling, converging on a console at the center of the chamber. Marta let out a low whistle as she studied the console. This thing makes our best tech look like junkyard scraps. I've never seen anything like it. Joss tilted his head. Let me guess. Don't touch anything, right? Marta smirked. Exactly. I like my atoms where they are, thanks. Ilara stepped closer to the console, her pulse quickening as the symbols engraved on it flickered to life. The orb from the altar above pulsed again, sending waves of energy through the chamber, and the console responded, rearranging its interface into something that looked understandable. It's reacting to us, Ilara whispered, running her hand across the console's glowing surface. It's like it knew we were coming. The screen before her displayed a series of ancient messages. They scrolled by in bursts of light, fragments of a long-lost narrative that hinted at a dark truth. The builders of Solace were not just observers of the galaxy. They were preparing for an event that had yet to come. They called it Phase 2. Marta leaned over Ilara's shoulder, reading the fragmented text aloud. Observe, prepare, remain unseen. Phase 2, activation pending. She glanced at Ilara, concern etched on her face. That doesn't sound like something good. Ilara nodded, her mind racing. Whatever this is, they knew something was coming, something big, and they were making sure they were ready for it. Jews frowned, tapping his fingers nervously on the hilt of his sidearm. So, what's Phase 2? Some kind of ancient apocalypse protocol? Before Alara could respond, the console buzzed, and a holographic projection appeared in the air above them, a map of the galaxy, with hundreds of glowing points scattered across it. Some of the points blinked out, while others flared brightly, as if marking the rise and fall of civilizations. Marta squinted at the display. These are extinction events, wars, planetary collapses. She pointed at a cluster of fading lights. They knew about all of them. Centuries before they happened. Joss let out a low whistle. They were watching everything. But why? Ilara's eyes narrowed as she studied the hologram. They weren't just watching. They were planning, preparing for something they knew was inevitable. Her gaze shifted to a section of the map where a large, ominous black void stretched across multiple star systems. It pulsed faintly, as if something terrible lay hidden within it, waiting to emerge. This is what they were afraid of, Ilara whispered, a chill running down her spine. Phase 2 isn't just about preparation, it's about survival. Marta stared at the void in disbelief. Whatever's in there, it's still coming, isn't it? Ilara nodded grimly. And now that we've activated this system, we've triggered something. We've started Phase 2. Joe swallowed hard. So, what exactly did we wake up? Before anyone could answer, the machines around them began to hum louder, their lights intensifying as the energy within the chamber surged. The orb above them pulsed rapidly, and the walls shimmered with strange symbols, as if the entire planet were coming alive. We need to get back to the ship, Ilara ordered, her voice sharp with urgency. Now, the crew scrambled back up the stairs, racing toward the exit. As the chamber behind them rumbled with power, they burst into the open air just as a shockwave of energy rippled across the meadow, lighting up the sky with a dazzling display of colors. Strange patterns spread across the planet's surface, glowing veins of energy that connected everything, the land, the trees, the ruins, into a single unified network. The Odyssey shuddered as the ground beneath it trembled, the entire planet humming with life. Ilara didn't know what was happening, but she knew one thing for certain: the galaxy would never be the same. "Get us off this planet," she barked as they sprinted back into the ship. Joe slid into the pilot's seat and powered up the engines. "You don't have to tell me twice." The Odyssey roared to life, lifting off the ground just as the shockwave reached them. The ship shot into the sky, racing toward the safety of orbit. Below them, the planet pulsed with energy, as if awakening from a long slumber. Once they were safely in orbit, Ilara stared out the viewport at the glowing world beneath them. "We need to send a message to the Galactic Council," she said quietly. "They need to know what we've found." Joe's raised an eyebrow. "You think they'll believe us?" Ilara gave him a wry smile. "They'll have to. Solace is real, and it's just the beginning." Marta sat back, her expression grim. "But what happens next? What's Phase 2 really about?" Ilara's gaze remained fixed on the planet below, her mind racing with possibilities. They had unlocked something ancient and powerful, something that had been waiting for millennia, and now that it was awake, there was no telling what it would bring. "Whatever it is," Ilara said softly, "we'll be ready, because that's what we do." Joss grinned. "Captain's orders?" Ilara smiled. "Captain's orders." The ship's comm system beeped, signaling the beginning of their transmission to the Galactic Council. Ilara took a deep breath and began to record her message, knowing that her words would change the course of history. "This is Captain Ilara Voss of the Odyssey. We have found solace, and with it, we've uncovered a warning. A message left behind by a civilization that knew more than we can imagine. They called it Phase 2, and whatever it is, it's coming." She paused, her gaze drifting back to the glowing planet below. "But we won't face it alone. We are human, and we never stop searching. We never stop hoping. No matter what lies ahead, we will find a way." The transmission ended and silence filled the bridge. For a moment they sat in stillness, the weight of their discovery settling over them like a heavy blanket. Then, Ilara smiled. "Let's go home." The Odyssey turned away from Solace, its engines burning bright against the darkness of space. They didn't know what the future would bring, but they knew one thing for certain: they were ready. Because humans didn't just survive, they dreamed. And sometimes when the stars aligned, they found exactly what they were searching for. And this time, their dream would change the galaxy forever.